Hi everyone, welcome back to Presley Mania. My name is Rhonda and thank you so much for tuning into my show. There is so much going on in the Elvis world, and unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't revolve around Elvis. It's about what's going on regarding the rights to his stuff, the rights to his music, and bottom line is it all boils down to money, 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 money. That's what it is. There is a court case going on right now, and we have talked about it in some length. And if you have not seen my other shows, you can go back. Just if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Then you can go on and you can look at all my past videos and can catch up on what I'm talking about here. So I want to, before we go any further, talk about this EPE Graceland Holdings suit that has been brought against GWS Auctions, Bridget Cruz, Thomas McDonald, and Sherry McDonald regarding items that Graceland claims were part of a sale in 1990 that they worked out with Colonel Tom Parker for $2 million, and that they were given in this sale all of these items, and they're saying that the McDonald's are in possession of things that belong to them and that they should have never had, and that should have been part of the sale. The McDonald family was going to auction some of these things off, and they were using GWS Auctions and Bridget Cruz. They completely deny this allegation, and they say that these items were not part of the sale to Graceland, and also that they had been given, or that Greg McDonald had been given these items by the Colonel personally. We don't know yet. We don't know if EPE is right, if the McDonald's are right. We're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out. I have questions for EPE. I have questions for the McDonald's. I have questions for GWS Auctions and Bridget Cruz, because I could see this playing out in several different ways, okay? But let's talk about a ruling that just came down from the Superior Court of California on January 28th, which was 2 days ago. So the nature of the proceedings was hearing on application for writ of possession against defendants GWS Auctions Inc., Bridget Cruz, Sherry McDonald, and Thomas McDonald. The court's tentative ruling is published to all parties via posting on the court's website. The matter is called for hearing. After argument of counsel, the court rules in accordance with its tentative ruling, which is filed and adopted as the final ruling of the court and incorporated herein by reference. Summary of the court's ruling. Plaintiff Graceland Holdings LLC and Elvis Presley Enterprises Inc. seek a writ of possession and turnover order against defendants GWS Auctions Incorporated, Bridget Cruz, Sherry McDonald, and Thomas McDonald to recover materials previously owned by Colonel Tom Parker in relation to his management of Elvis Presley. The court has read and considered the moving papers, oppositions, and reply, and renders the following decision. At this stage, plaintiffs, meaning Graceland Holdings and EPE, need only show a probability of success to obtain a writ of possession, not that they necessarily will win at trial. To the extent there is any doubt for individual items of property, it is plain from plaintiff's submission that they will preserve and not sell or transfer the property. Should defendants prevail at trial, the property can be returned to the McDonald defendants. The same would not be true if the application were denied. The property would be auctioned off, and plaintiffs would face the difficulty of third-party bona fide purchasers. Plaintiff's application is granted. The court does not order a turnover as it was not requested. As defendants have shown no ownership interest in the property, no bond is required. Plaintiffs have not submitted a proposed order for writ of possession after hearing, and one must be submitted in the next 2 court days or it will be waived. The order must be approved as to form by opposing counsel. Plaintiff shall give notice. Okay, that's that. That tells us, what's going on. So for now, they're asking that the items that are being, questioned are given to Graceland because they have the means to take care of them according to the court. And that should the McDonald's win this suit and Bridget Cruz and GWS Auctions, they will be returned to them and then they can proceed with auctioning off the items. So here we go. All right. The next thing I want to talk about gets a little stickier here. I have heard some things that aren't, I feel, exactly right. And I want to caution all of you who watch my videos and watch other content creators who follow various Facebook pages, that kind of thing, that you double check the things that are posted or the things that are said. Why do I say that? Because unless you double check and know for yourself that what is being said is correct, you're going to fall for anything, okay? We need, as keepers of the flame for Elvis and Lisa Marie Presley, we need to make sure that whatever we're saying, whatever we're telling people is true and factual. Double check me. That's fine. Some of you don't always agree with everything I say, and that's okay. And we can have a discussion about that. And I appreciate people coming to me with constructive thoughts and that kind of thing. And what about this and what about that? That is all well and good. We need to be educated. But what we don't need is to believe every single word that comes out of everyone's mouth, because it isn't always right. Where am I going with this? Okay. There have been some rumblings that Bridget is saying that Greg McDonald's book, Elvis and the Colonel, that there is evidence in there that substantiates the fact that Greg had the items that are part of this court case in his possession, and that he was gifted them, that they were given to him, and that they were never part of the 1990 sale. Okay? And they read, it was read on a YouTube show, parts of the book, and it was taken completely out of context. And so I want to address that, and I want to talk about it a little bit, because I want to make sure that the information that's being relayed to you guys is right, okay? So I have gone through Greg's book. I've wanted to talk about this book with y'all for quite some time. I've gone through it, read the whole thing. I have got dog-eared pages. I don't know if you can see, but I've got all kinds of tags and highlights and paper clips and all kinds of things, because I have dissected this book. Mainly because I do that with almost everything I read that's Elvis's. I want to know if what somebody is saying is right or if it's wrong. And I found a few things in here that I completely disagree with, and based on some digging, have found to be inaccurate. So, let's talk about what Bridget is claiming to be evidence that Greg had these items prior to the sale to EPE from the Colonel, or that he was gifted to them, or that they were never part of the deal. So let's talk about that. So they read a section from the book, and it says that these items, he acquired the items in 1970 from the Colonel, and it was over a decade before the first agreement happened. Well, 1970, Elvis was still around, so it talks about percentages, what was the Colonel was going to keep, what Elvis was going to keep, all of that stuff in different things. Well, this particular part of the book is not talking about items that Greg was gifted. This particular part of the book, let me tell you, it starts with chapter 22, and it's called Under New Management. This is, I can read you exactly what it says, so let's talk about it a little bit, okay? It starts off with Elvis is with Ginger Alden by this time. So this is way after 1970, obviously. It's like, so here we go. And it talks about, it has Barry Geller mentioned in here. It talks about Elvis performing a marriage ceremony for some people. And then it talks about where they got this information and how it came about. So let me tell you first of all how it came about. On March 31st, 1976, the Colonel and Greg McDonald attended a Billy Graham crusade at the San Diego Stadium. And we were there to visit the manager of the facility, who was a friend of the Colonel's. In fact, Colonel Parker was on a first-name basis with every building manager of every venue in the country. This was simply a social visit to see an old friend and become more familiar with a fairly new venue, possibly one where Elvis might play someday. Elvis usually performed at the San Diego Sports Arena, an indoor arena built in 1966, which sat about 12,000 people. The stadium was massive and had the capacity for 70,000 seats, and Billy Graham packed the place. As we were talking in this gentleman's office, located behind the box office area, we couldn't help noticing the large laundry baskets filled with money, most likely from food and beverage concessions and merchandise. Anytime Colonel Parker saw that amount of cash, he got inspired. I could practically hear his brain percolating. As we were driving back to Escondido to visit Lawrence Welk at the Welcome Inn, the Colonel was smoking a cigar and looking out the window. You know, I think Elvis would love to sing gospel music to a large audience, he said. He could draw huge crowds like the one we just saw and perhaps get inspired again. Perhaps it might get him out of his funk and save Elvis. Whenever Elvis played his piano and sang at home, it was always gospel songs. Whenever he sang in between takes at the recording studio, it was gospel, sang with sound checks. He grew up on gospel, loved singing it, loved hearing it, loved to hear others play it. It was his passion music. This was the first time in a while that I had seen Colonel Parker excited. He had been down on Elvis for the past year, and their level of communication was at an all-time low. The next day, the Colonel called Elvis in Memphis, and while I couldn't hear what Elvis said on the other end of the line, I was in the Colonel's Palm Springs office and could tell he was very receptive to the idea. He seemed to have Elvis's undivided attention because they talked on the phone for a long time, and this was a period when Elvis wasn't taking his calls. The idea would be to take Elvis off the road for a while and let him regain his health. When he felt better, he would record a gospel album and take it out on the road and play in large stadiums. One of the details I picked up on was that Elvis really liked the idea of having a 100-person choir backing him in every city that would volunteer their time, just as they did for a Billy Graham crusade. A director would rehearse them a day before the show and get them ready for Elvis. Okay. Let me finish this paragraph and then I'll get to what I was going to say. To do all of this, they'd need a large infusion of cash. The money would cover Elvis's overhead to keep him off the road for the gospel album, distributed on the Colonel and Elvis's new label, Boxcar Records, and to develop a whole new roadshow. The Colonel felt the only way to pull this off would be to take on a new financial partner, and if they were to do this, it had to be done discreetly, but where to find someone like that? Okay, now we're fixing to get to the meat of what was said by Bridget, claiming that this backed up her claim. Okay, my bookkeeper, Greg McDonald's bookkeeper, Bob Stewart, had as clients Rudolph, and he went by Rudy, Weyerhaeuser Driscoll Sr. and his wife Margot. They were multimillionaires and philanthropists tied to the billion-dollar Weyerhaeuser fortune. The American Timberland Company has produced a variety of products such as lumber, paper, and fodder for livestock since the 1800s. Rudy thought the idea of owning a piece of Elvis Presley sounded intriguing. Margot was a former ballet dancer who was a big Ricky Nelson fan, and I, Greg McDonald, just so happened to manage him. These refined folks who sat on boards, supported the arts, bestowed endowments on research universities, and ran their own foundation were perhaps looking for a little excitement and a foot in the door of the entertainment industry. I really didn't know their motivation, but they were very nice and classy people. They wanted to meet Colonel Parker right away. I called him at his house and explained who I was with and what they were interested in doing. He told me to bring the Driscolls to his house. They met, hit it off, and spoke for several hours. The Colonel got down to brass tacks. He wanted $10 million, which he and Elvis would split right down the middle. In addition, Rudy would put up the money for some additional projects, which he was happy to do. He'd also keep the Colonel on as Elvis's manager. For that, Rudy would get 25% of all future earnings. The Colonel would give up 25% of his back end, while Elvis still retained his 50% share. To compensate me, Greg McDonald, here we go. This is it. To compensate me for setting up the meeting, Rudy asked me what I wanted. I knew Ricky Nelson needed some national exposure to help him make a big comeback, so they agreed to bankroll a television special to the tune of $200,000. That ended up being It's All Right Now, which was directed by Taylor Hackford and aired in syndication in 1978. The Driscolls were listed as the executive producers, and if that wasn't enough, they leased out an entire floor in a high-rise building at 6430 Sunset Boulevard. Today, it is known as the C&N Building in the heart of Hollywood, and gave me, Greg McDonald, a spectacular office filled with, here it comes, high-end furniture, posters, gold records, and filing cabinets filled with Elvis stuff. The office, which had a sign on the door that read Margot Enterprises Incorporated, was a virtual shrine to the king. The Colonel had a tiny office at the RCA building across the street, and it was nowhere near as nice as mine. We both got a kick out of it, and he enjoyed ribbing me about my luxurious accommodations and how he was going to be parking himself in my office to conduct business. In fact, he once laughed In fact, he once tossed me out of my office to hold a meeting with Abe Lostfogel. I'm not sure I said that right. I laughed, then went downstairs to the Jolly Roger, a restaurant on the bottom floor, to grab a bite to eat. I took no offense. It was a pleasure that I could do something nice for Colonel Parker. The Driscolls were not extraordinarily kind. The Driscolls were not only extraordinarily kind, but serious ballers. When they placed a $10 million check in Colonel Parker's hands, he knew these folks were the real deal. It was probably the largest amount of money he ever held in his hands, but when it came down to it, the Colonel couldn't cash the check. He didn't give me a reason why he never went through with it, but he couldn't bring himself to go to the bank and deposit it. If I were to guess, there was probably some concern that Elvis couldn't hold it together and the Colonel might be on the hook for that 7-figure check. The Colonel had a hard enough time making people whole while on tour, and this was exponentially more. The Driscolls understood and were nothing but gracious about the Colonel's change of heart, with Elvis becoming unreliable while simultaneously hemorrhaging cash on Cadillacs, expensive jewelry, and Hawaiian vacations. Holding on to that check may have been the Colonel's insurance policy for both of them. Okay, whether you agree with what Greg has written about what happened with the Colonel and Elvis and this whole gospel album and gospel tour or not, that's beside the point. The point is that it has taken this whole thing that supposedly is being used to prove Bridget's point is taken completely out of context. Okay? It says that Greg was given an office with posters and Elvis records on the wall and a filing cabinet filled with Elvis stuff. Let's make this clear. The Driscolls set that office up. This was not the Colonel's stuff. Following me? This was stuff they had bought and put in. It's not the letters. It's not part of all of the things that the Colonel had. These were none of the Colonel's things. None of them. This office was decorated and leased for Greg McDonald by the Driscolls and furnished by them. Their stuff didn't come from the Colonel. So that kind of just completely disproves what she was trying to say. Now I know this video is going a little longer, and I'm not trying to pick on Bridget. If Elvis Presley Enterprises would have said this, I would have said something about that too. I have questions where they're concerned. I have questions about all of this. But what I'm trying to point out are the facts. Let's not take just a little bit of something and make it out to be what we want it to be. You know, you always have to look at, when you say something like that, and if you're going to take a portion of a book, you got to look at what was it, who were they speaking about, who were they speaking to, what's the context of it, what is it all about, and then make your opinions, okay? Then on page 340, and this chapter is about Colonel Parker Reconsidered. This talks about, this is after Elvis has left us. This talks about the 1990 deal. So, it says, it talks about the 1983 lawsuit between Elvis Presley Enterprises and Colonel Tom Parker, and then it talks about this deal. And this is the only mention, well, there is another mention of the deal in another place in the book, but this is the one that goes into depth. It says, even before the 1983 lawsuit with the Presley estate was settled, even before it was settled, Colonel Parker picked up the phone and called Jack Soden shortly after the opening of Graceland and made a peace offering. He told Soden that despite his lawsuit with the Presley estate, he was willing to help him in any future endeavors involving Elvis and Graceland. At this point, everyone associated with the estate was a bean counter or lawyer, and they didn't know the music business or how to run a museum attraction featuring an artist of Elvis's stature. The Colonel didn't want to see Elvis's legacy disappear or Graceland to fall into someone else's hands. Soden took Colonel Parker at face value, and they developed a nice friendship over the years. Their relationship continued to bear fruit for Elvis Presley Enterprises, who invited Colonel Parker to work on special projects for them in the coming years. The biggest harvest came in 1990 when Colonel Parker unloaded the large collection of Elvis items he had packed away in 4 buildings outside of Nashville. It contained scrapbooks of news clippings, magazine articles, and ads, original contracts for movies and television appearances, letters, telegrams, invoices, and even fan mail going back to 1955. The collection also included multiple samples of original souvenir and promotional memorabilia through the years, including the original pressing plates and artwork from which they were made. And he had numerous newsreels and interview audio tapes, acetate recordings, original copies of every record Elvis ever released, and thousands of original photographs and negatives spanning Elvis's entire career. Colonel sold the items, which filled 7 semi-trailer trucks and weighed an estimated 35 tons, for a bargain basement price of $2 million. The collection, which even included Elvis's 1957 gold lame suit, considered one of the most iconic rock outfits in history, was a wise investment for the estate, as the collection is probably worth 100 times the original asking price more than 3 decades after the sale. It's also a safe bet. The collection spawned several projects for Elvis Presley Enterprises, including new and exciting displays at Graceland to keep the faithful coming year after year. Okay, so that's where it talks about the sale in 1990. That the lawsuit is saying that the items Greg McDonald has were part of that sale. Okay. I've got a couple of other things, so we may have to wait and put this on a video for next week when we start dissecting this book cover to cover. But I want to say this. If, in fact, Greg was given these items by Colonel Tom Parker to keep, and they were not part of the sale, and that the Colonel trusted him to keep and not divulge, why would he put that in his book? Okay. Then we can make the argument, if he wasn't supposed to divulge this information, why are they being sold at GWS auctions? Because we know in that video that I talked about with Bridget Cruz and talking to Greg McDonald, that they said there was damaging information in it. So why would you, if you loved the Colonel as much as you claimed you did, and you loved Elvis as much as you claimed you did, and some of these things that they could auction off are damaging, why would you do that if you were trusted to keep them? And why would you turn your hand in the book? Number 2, my second point is, if Greg wasn't supposed to have these items, why would he mention them in the book? He wouldn't. He wouldn't want to turn his hand for that either, right? He wouldn't want to say, oh, by the way, I have these things. Because Graceland would be like, then give them back to me, you know? But the way they found out about it was through a different avenue. Bridget actually contacted Graceland. Remember me talking about this in a previous video? She actually contacted Graceland and told them that she had seen these items and who had them. Part of these items were auctioned off, I believe, in 2022, if memory serves me correctly. And Graceland said nothing about them. Nothing. Just let it go. See, now that raises questions to me. Why did Graceland let those items go in 2022? But now all of a sudden, these items that the McDonald family is wanting to auction off are okay and they're safe. Is it because of what the content is and what's in these items? It's enough to make you think. And also, Lisa Marie was still here then. Could it be that she said, just let it go. Just let it go. I don't know. I have no answers for that. But what I do know is that the statement that was made that Greg McDonald says in his book that he was gifted the items in 1970 and that they were his, I can't find that anywhere in here. And as we go through this book, little by little, you will also see that. If you have read this book and you have a different opinion, please feel free to tell me your thoughts. I would love to hear them. And like I said, this is my research, my opinion, for entertainment purposes only. And again, don't take my word for gospel. Go research it for yourself. Come up with your own conclusions. And then you can post your facts on Facebook or wherever you want to do it. I just think it's incredibly important. There is some noise outside my window. I apologize if that's come through the video. I just hope that what I've said here makes sense. I'm not trying to beat up on anybody. I'm not trying to cause problems. What I'm trying to do is just point out the actual facts. So anyway, so until next time, y'all remember you only get one shot at this life, so live each day to the fullest because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. See you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Quick correction. I went back and reviewed my video and I found a little mistake, so I wanted to come back on here and tell you guys. So it wasn't Elvis that performed the marriage ceremony that I was talking about earlier. It was Larry Geller. So I wanted to correct that for y'all because I know some of you have read that book and you would be like, no, she said that wrong. So Larry Geller was the one officiating the ceremony, and Elvis was just providing the place and all of the things. So anyway, wanted to throw that out there. So see you guys, if I can even get this out. I will see you guys next time. Bye, y'all.